Rules Committee to come to order, and good evening, and lots of bright, smiling faces here. Marcia, you look good in your burnt orange. Jan, you look awesome in your red blazer.
With a nice collar.
Well, that is a nice collar. Tonight, the Rules Committee will consider H.R. 3495, the Women's Public Health and Safety Act. The bill is based upon the basic principles, I believe, of federalism. Under this bill, a state would be granted the discretion to withhold Medicaid funds from a clinic or doctor that provides abortion services. Pretty straightforward. H.R. 3495 represents a continuation of efforts to pass meaningful legislation that prioritizes opportunities that represent values and sanctity of human life, which we believe is important, and which we heard from the Pope last week about how important all life is. This gives an opportunity for states to use federal funds accordingly. With us today is the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Marcia Blackburn, the Energy and Commerce Committee, and joining her is her colleague, Jan Schakowsky, in red. So we have orange and red today. Before we have both of our witnesses that come forward to give testimony, I'd like to defer to my dear friend, the gentleman from Massachusetts, for any opening statement he'd like to make. Gentleman's recognized.
Well, thank you, and I welcome you both here today. I just want to state for the record that the law in this country is that no federal funds can be used for abortion. And I just want to remind my Republican colleagues that we are only days away from another government shutdown. And the last government shutdown that my friends thrust upon the nation cost the American taxpayers $24 billion. And so I have a hard time believing that preventing Medicaid patients from seeing their doctors is the best use of our time. But you're in charge, so you run the show, and I look forward to the testimony, and thank you very much.
I thank you very much, and I'd like to just briefly address the issue that the gentleman brought up because it's a good point, and that is we are very concerned and recognize the constitutionality of what we're trying to do as well as the calendar. And we are awaiting at this time the United States Senate, who is gaining their momentum, to decide the piece of legislation. And you will find that we'll be asked to come back to the Rules Committee sometime as quickly as the United States Senate does their work. They have been working on these issues diligently, holding votes, having discussions, working with each other. We're trying to do the same over here, and I do appreciate the gentleman. I know he and I will be on the floor, or Mrs. Slaughter, or Judge Hastings, or Mr. Polis, and we will be talking about the importance of ensuring that this government and the continuity of funding streams continues. And you have my highest of commitment from, I believe, the Rules Committee side, knowing that we will, as quickly as we can, be calling a hearing. We will not delay at all the work that needs to be done, and will get us to the floor so that this body can act accordingly.
Well,
and I do appreciate the gentleman.
And I appreciate the gentleman's reassurance, but as recent history has taught us, that just because the Rules Committee considers something and even reports out a rule doesn't mean that the Republican conference accepts it. And we found ourselves on a number of occasions coming back to the Rules Committee with trying to manage a crisis. So, I hope we can keep the government open, but I think that's what our priority should be. And again, beating up on poor women is not my idea of a constructive use of our time, but I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the gentleman very much. Ladies, please, if you'll feel free to come to the witness table. Both of you are no strangers to the Rules Committee, to your friends that count on you not only being here and giving us expert witness testimony, but also the graciousness that you bring representing yourself, your district, your party, and your ideas. And as Mrs. Blackburn knows, Ms. Schakowsky, and you've been up here plenty of times, we try and deal with difficult subjects in a polite and respectful way. And we try and do that, and you will be afforded that also. And Mrs. Blackburn represents thoughts and ideas that I agree with, but even when I don't agree, you will be given the assurances that you'll be dealt with fairly up here. And so I want to thank both of you for being here. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered in the record. We encourage you, because we've got an awesome stenographer up here, to give her whatever you've got, and encourage you also to speak into the microphone with that green light on when you're given that time. The gentlewoman from Tennessee, the wife of Mr. Chuck Blackburn, my dear friend, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to come before you on H.R. 3495. This is the Women's Public Health and Safety Act. It's a bill that Mr. Duffy authored and brought to us at Energy and Commerce Committee, and we have, as you see before you, an amendment that will become the bill. As you appropriately stated, this is a bill about flexibility and about giving the states more flexibility as to who they choose to include in their Medicaid program health care providers. And they may want to have people who do not perform or participate in the performance of elective abortions. And we have some states who have sought to end their Medicaid contracts, and they have been blocked from doing so by CMS. Currently, we have 4 states that are in litigation. Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, and Utah are in litigation over these very issues. So this is a step that we can take that says, let's give the states the flexibility that they are requesting and that they need. They have proven that they need this flexibility, and let's allow them to make these decisions. And with that, I will yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schakowsky, welcome. Delighted that you're here. If you please make sure that green light is on. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you so much for allowing me to testify once again, and I am testifying in opposition to 3495. Here we go again, to consider legislation that is purported to protect women, but the truth is that this bill is yet another attack on women's health and their ability to make their own choices. The misleading name Women's Public Health and Safety Act seeks to target and exclude abortion providers, or anyone who even remotely supports or is involved with a provider or entity that provides abortions from participating in Medicaid, even though not a single federal dime is spent on providing that abortion. In fact, I've been calling this legislation yet another radical assault on women's health care. This bill would permit a state to terminate a provider from Medicaid solely on the basis that the provider also provides access to a safe and legal abortion without federal dollars, without regard for the impact on access to care, and leaving no recourse for that provider. Excluding a provider from Medicaid solely on the basis that the provider also provides access to safe and legal abortions would be bad enough, but the legislation doesn't stop there. This legislation would allow a state to terminate a provider from Medicaid if that provider has had any sort of, quote, participation, unquote, with an abortion. What constitutes participation on the part of an entity is completely undefined. And let's be clear, the Blackburn Amendment does not change H.R. 3495 underlying purpose, intent, or its devastating impact. The Blackburn Amendment gives states the ability to, quote, establish criteria, unquote, for determining if a provider that, quote, performs or participates in the performance of, unquote, abortions would be allowed in the Medicaid program. This broad language would give states an unchecked authority to exclude any provider the state defines as participating without any consideration to the health needs and concerns of its Medicaid enrollees. Some examples of how far this criteria could go: a state could exclude a hospital for offering life-saving care as required under the federal Emergency Medical Treatment, or EMTALA, law. If a state determines that the care was provided when there was not an immediate threat to the woman's life, but instead was a serious health care threat, or entire hospital systems could be excluded because many hospitals do provide abortion services. This would not only mean that Medicaid patients could lose access to their choice of medical providers for all of their health care services, but could be particularly harmful in rural areas where there are fewer hospitals to serve communities. This bill allows the government unprecedented involvement in a woman's own personal health care decisions, right down to who she chooses as her provider. That's why, historically, federal Medicaid rules have always, regardless of which party is in power, provided the right of Medicaid beneficiaries to seek care from a trusted and medically qualified provider of their choosing. This bill is one more assault in the long list of Republican assaults on women's health. We know that if this legislation had been enacted in the past month, when Governor Jindal tried to kick Planned Parenthood out of Medicaid, there would have been only 29 providers left across the state to serve more than 5,000 additional patients. And Louisiana is not a unique case. In 2/3 of the 491 counties in which they are located, Planned Parenthood health centers serve at least half of all women obtaining contraceptive care from safety net health centers. In 1/5 of the counties in which they are located, Planned Parenthood sites are the sole safety net family planning center. The Medicaid statutory provider choice protections are there for a reason. That language protects against the ideological and political whims of politicians at the expense of women. The claim that this legislation seeks to protect women could not be further from the truth. This is yet another attempt for Republicans to erode the fundamental, constitutionally protected right for safe and legal abortion. This legislation, which would undermine the right of a woman to choose her own provider, or the right of a provider to support or provide access to safe and legal abortion, should be rejected. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. This is an issue back home for me also. And I'm sure every one of our members, whether you're from New York, whether you're from Dallas, Texas, have strong opinions. I believe state legislatures know a lot about this issue. They know a lot. For instance, I learned the other day that there's no Planned Parenthood organization in the country that has a mammogram available to it. I thought that was women's health care. So we have isolated it down, and Ms. Schakowsky, I believe you very adaptly, appropriately said it. This is about abortion services. And I think the states should be given that latitude therein. And so I respect you being here, Ms. Blackburn. I thank you for bringing the bill, and I'd like to say thank you to both you and the gentlewoman from North Carolina. The Vice Chairman of the committee is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I will say that I will associate myself with your remarks on why we're here today and the concerns that the people in our districts have on this issue. It is the number one issue I hear from everyone in my district, and I think we are doing the right thing with this legislation. I thank Mr. Duffy for introducing it and Ms. Blackburn for bringing it here. I respect our colleague, Ms. Schakowsky, but totally disagree with her, and yield back.
Gentlewoman, yields back time. The gentlewoman, the ranking member, Mrs. Slaughter, is recognized.
Thank you very
Yes,
much,
ma'am.
Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. I think we all know very well why we're here. We're trying to get enough votes to pass a CR. And somehow if we throw out something extraneous like this that may assuage people somewhere, but I'm not getting any great clamor, never have had about this. I'm not sure about the mammogram issue either, because I know that Planned Parenthood does a lot of cancer screening, and I really need to check on that. But in any case, I ask unanimous consent to put the statement of the administrative
Without
policy.
objection.
And let me read it. It's very short. Administration strongly opposes House passage of H.R. 3495 because it would restrict women's health and reproductive choices. H.R. 3495 would permit a state Medicaid program to stop paying for any covered benefits provided to eligible individuals by qualified health care providers solely because those providers were involved in abortions. Long-standing federal policy, which we already know, already prohibits the use of federal funds for abortions, except in cases of rape, or incest, or when the life of the woman would be endangered. Now, by permitting the withholding of federal Medicaid funding for those providers, clinics, or hospitals, H.R. 3495 likely would limit access to both critical women's health services and health care throughout local communities across the nation, and would have a disproportionate impact on women and low-income individuals. Moreover, it would undermine a woman's right upheld by the Supreme Court to make her own choices about her body and her health care, and if the president were presented with H.R. 3495, he would veto the bill. And the question that I would like to ask Congresswoman Blackburn, is this constitutional?
Thank you, Ms. Slaughter. You know, we have the requirement by House Republicans that you have to state the constitutionality of the bill.
Do you have to check
Of
on it
course,
before you do that?
Your Rules Committee actually handles that check. So I'm sure that they can present that to you. The point
Since this
of
is a protected right under the Constitution, Roe v. Wade, it really seems odd to me. I know that every time they try to do cases where they change the limits of how long the first trimester is or permitted, that the courts all restrict them every single time. So I guess this would be just another court case if it were to become?
Oh, no, ma'am, I don't think so at all. What the absence of this bill is what is called the court cases. As I said earlier, you have 4 states that are currently in litigation right now.
Because they tried to pass a bill like
they-
this?
No, ma'am, because they were trying to do some restrictions on their providers.
And they will,
You have,
is this his federal court? Ms. Schakowsky, you know about these 4 cases, 4 states?
I don't know, I wanted to make another comment if I could.
Yes?
I think that the point is also, this would not just take away funding for that portion of the services that a
That even
healthcare
Planned
provider.
Parenthood does,
That
right.
means that
It
it
close
would
down a
close
hospital.
down a provider, a clinic, or an entire healthcare system that,
For all
For
Medicaid
all-
patients.
yes, it
Yes.
would provide all the services.
It certainly is drastic to try to assuage people's concerns so they can vote for the CR. We know why we're here, and we don't have any misunderstanding about that, and we're here to, on our side, to show that we show up for a Rules Committee. But I would seriously, because 4 states are trying to do it, and you want to do it here because you think that would make it legal for those 4 states?
I think that what we're hearing.
Or would it not still be a constitutional issue?
What we're hearing from the states is they would like the flexibility to determine who is the provider in their Medicaid program. Now, as you will remember, back in the mid-'90s, many states went through the CMS waiver process in order to be able to do experimentation with the delivery systems for health care
Right, that's strictly controlled.
in their states.
But that doesn't have anything to do with a constitutional question.
What this has to do with is the determination of how the states utilize their funds that they are receiving. And there
But
is
you
nothing
do
in
restrict
this,
it to
Ms.
people
Slaughter.
who are providing services for women's
There
reproductive
is nothing
health.
in this that restricts a woman's right or access to abortion. Absolutely nothing.
It does if you take
As
away
a
the people
matter-
who can
well, as a
provide it. If you
matter of
shut down a
fact-
hospital or a healthcare clinic,
No,
you don't think so?
You reposition that. You know, and something that's important to
You
realize
reposition it?
is you reposition the funds. That's exactly what we have done.
Good
The
grief.
community health centers
Yeah.
are, see, Planned Parenthood has
Well,
put-
let
they have
me
put
reclaim
their-
my time, Ms. Blackburn. There's no question here. The community health centers have made it perfectly clear they can't take this on.
Oh, yes,
This
they
is
can,
not on,
and they
because
do.
99% of the work that's
And they
done
do.
by
They have
Planned
been.
Parenthood, that
They
you're, the
have
one
been.
you want to fight, has nothing in the world to do with abortion, and a number of Planned Parenthood centers don't do abortions at all. And so what you're saying here, when you talk about repositioning it, I think what you're really doing is you're taking away needed health services. They also serve men who come to Planned Parenthood for services and health diagnoses and things that they are medicines that they're allowed to have. I've been absolutely, ever since we passed the health care bill, It has absolutely astonished me, and I can't for the life of me understand why you all want to take health care away from people. It's beyond me. People who can afford it can get it, and if you don't come in that category, you're out of luck as far as Congress is concerned. I yield back the balance.
Chairwoman yields back her time. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being a few minutes late, and there must have been something discussed that I am unaware of, and I'll ask my colleague from the Energy and Commerce Committee, Ms. Blackburn. I have read this legislation from front to back, and I don't see any language closing any facilities for anybody, but that's the conversation I walked in on. Has something been added to this bill that would close a facility?
Mr. Woodall, there is nothing in here that closes any facility. What it does is to allow the states the flexibility they have asked us if they could get for utilization of those funds and participants in their Medicaid delivery system. And as we have seen, as Planned Parenthood has reduced the services that they offer to women, and most of the women's health care services now are outsourced, if you will. And it's important, the states are saying we really need some more flexibility. And as I said, there are 4 states who already are in a lawsuit over this issue. So as we look at the funding on women's health, what we want to do is make certain that the money is going to get to the point where it will meet the needs of those communities, and flexibility is helpful in that regard.
I'm a big fan of local control, but
Yes.
there are often some moral issues that we do deal with here. I certainly think life is one of those. I think providing critical care to communities that need it is one of those. I was looking for the mandate in this language. Is there a requirement that a state...
No, it's a flexibility requirement. And Mr. Duffy had done the bill, and then when it came to Energy and Commerce, we did an amendment that becomes the bill. And as you can see, it is Section 2, increasing state flexibility in determining participation of providers who perform or participate in the performance of abortions. And so what you have is the insertion of flexibility into the allocation of this funding stream. That is something that the states would like to have. It's how you move money forward to meet the greatest need, and it's the reason for bringing the bill forward.
I tell constituents back home when they talk about the fights that happen in Washington, sometimes we're just fighting about how to love on each other. And we disagree about what loving on each other looks like here. When it comes to health care and issues as difficult as some of these are, I feel certain that there's no one in this room that's going to love on the constituents of Georgia more than the folks who run the Georgia Medicaid program. I appreciate you bringing this bill to give them
Absolutely.
that flexibility.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I just feel it's important to state for the record, just so that people kind of understand this, that each year Planned Parenthood offers preventative services to millions of women to screen for cancer and sexually transmitted infections and to prevent unintended pregnancies. More than 90% of services provided by Planned Parenthood health centers are preventative, including primary care services such as contraceptives, sexually transmitted infection testing and treatment, and cervical and breast cancer screenings. Each year, Planned Parenthood health centers provide nearly 400,000 cervical cancer screenings, nearly 500,000 breast cancer screenings. I'm looking at some of the testimonies on behalf of Planned Parenthood. I have a testimony from a woman named Ashley who, quote, says, "When I was 23, I found a lump in my breast. I made an appointment at Planned Parenthood. The nurse practitioner found the lump and arranged for my first mammogram. I had a biopsy and the lump removed. It came back negative. Planned Parenthood even put me in contact with a group to help me pay for the procedure. Normally, it would have cost $1,200, but I paid approximately $200, which was all I could afford. If it weren't for Planned Parenthood, I would not have been able to get the procedure and keep myself healthy." I can go on and on and on about this. But, whether or not this will shut down a hospital, if you deny them the right to a Medicaid reimbursement or a health care system, it might very well, Mr. Woodall, depending on the hospital we're talking about. But at a minimum, what you're saying is that somehow it's okay to shut off health services for poor women, because Medicaid serves low-income populations. So what you were doing is denying access to, in many cases, life-saving preventative care to poor women, which I think is, quite frankly, offensive. Now, I just want to, and I do this every time we have a bill before the, I'm doing it quite a bit now because we have more and more bills that fall into this category, but does anybody believe in regular order anymore? Or
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well,
I do.
then, you know, and again, given the fact that this bill, I mean, doesn't have to be voted on today. I mean, you could do it next week. But, I mean, were there any hearings on this bill? Was there a markup? Ms. Blackburn, do you recall a hearing or a markup on this bill?
We did not do a hearing on this specific bill, but we have
so no
done
markup either,
lots
I
of
assume.
hearings. No, we haven't done a
So,
markup.
I mean,
We have
I guess,
done lots of hearings
but that's
on
regular
the
order.
issue.
That is
Yes.
regular order. And again, I know, you know, some of the critiques of this bill are that you know, its broad use of language could have unforeseen consequences for patient care. And I just say to my colleagues on the Republican side, I know you control the House, but is it too much to ask that we go through the committee process to examine some of these concerns? I know you guys think you know everything, and everything to you is really clear, but there is people go on these committees for a reason, so they can have a say in the legislative process, and routinely they get blocked out. So here we are with a bill that is not urgent, that has not gone through the committee process, that has not gone through any markups, that is designed to punish poor women and take away their access to health care. And I just think this is a lousy process. It's a lousy bill. But at a minimum, even if you bring lousy legislation before the Rules Committee, it ought to go through regular order. The committees ought to mean something in this Congress, and increasingly they mean nothing. With that, I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. By the way, the gentleman will be pleased with legislation that he'll see soon where we do exactly that, where we give specific intent to the Energy and Commerce Committee to appropriately look at in detail this issue so that the facts and figures are available, not just within committee, but they become generally available for the entire country.
Is that your special committee on Planned Parenthood you're talking about?
I think you'll see
Yeah,
an
well,
opportunity to follow exactly the same things you want. The gentleman's recommendation.
But with respect, you know, if you're going to form a committee to look into this, I think, you know, it would make more sense for you to report legislation out after the committee, which I think sounds like a waste of money. But you ought to. I mean, you have committees of jurisdiction already, but you ought to let the committees do their work and have their hearings before you bring legislation to the floor.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman.
and
I think he's far enough along where he recognizes if the state wants this flexibility, the state can get the flexibility. If the state chooses not to take up the flexibility, they won't get the flexibility.
So if you have a governor or a state legislature that basically wants to take away the right of a woman to make this very difficult choice with regard to abortion, then they will do it, notwithstanding what the Supreme Court has said. You somehow think that's okay. Or if a health care provider provides abortion services to women, which is legal, that you are saying that the state legislature should have the right to take away all Medicaid reimbursement to that health care system for cancer screenings, for other preventative care. I mean, come on. I mean, I guess the good news is that this is going nowhere. The bad news is that it continues this drumbeat, you know, beating up on poor women, and I think it is wrong. But I've said enough. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. My point is that we in fact do believe in regular order and believe that we will have a detailed analysis and report that will be available from the committee system. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Louisville, Texas, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, Mr. Chairman, as you know, in Texas, Governor Perry did decouple the funding through the Medicaid system from Planned Parenthood and said we are only going to pay for those services that are not associated with an institution that provides abortion services. And as a consequence, in fact, I think the figures sort of speak volumes about that there are now increased dollars going for women's health that are not associated with those that provide abortion services. Now, the publication PolitiFact is not generally kind to conservative thought. They took a statement by Joe Pullman, who's the head of the Texas Alliance for Life, who said that Texas funding for women's health services is at historically high levels, and in fact just increased another $50 million for the next 2 years in the last legislative session. They go on to note that Texas lawmakers this year voted to appropriate more for women's health services than before, including an additional $50 million. So PolitiFact, looking at Mr. Pullman's statement that Texas is funding women's health services at historically high levels, actually ended up rating this claim as true. And again, PolitiFact, not generally one that is kind to people on the conservative side. So I thought that was significant. Now, we did have a hearing along a similar issue in the Energy and Commerce Committee last week or the week before, and I do want to submit for the record the Texas Women's Health Program Provider Survey Patient Capacity Report. This is from January of 2013. That was 2 years after Governor Perry decoupled Planned Parenthood and Medicaid funding. So there was concern that perhaps the level of care was going to drop off. The conclusion of the Texas Women's Health Program Provider Survey was that overall, Texas Women's Health Program patient capacity results are positive. In most areas, the survey found that the state has the capacity to serve even more women in 2013. Again, reference the PolitiFact article that the last legislative session in 2015 increased that an additional $50 million. Mr. Chairman, all this is to say that it can be done. We don't have to ask the American taxpayer to fund a procedure that they find abhorrent. And the funding for women's health care has not been affected in the state of Texas, even though Governor Perry decoupled.
Will the gentleman yield? There is no federal funding that can be used to perform abortion. That's the law.
Yeah. And
so when you talk about
reclaiming my
decoupling,
time, reclaiming my time. We've been through this before. You know the money's fungible. You know that the money can be used for anything within the organization. So I think actually for the people of Texas, Governor Perry set us on a good path, and this provides the flexibility for other governors to do the same. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful to our witnesses. I'm grateful for the presentation today. I thank you for having the hearing. I'll yield back my time.
Well, thank the gentleman very much from Louisville, Texas. The gentleman from Florida, do you seek time? Judge Hastings?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, in
Yes,
the
sir.
movie Frozen, which I've had the good fortune of seeing several times with my grandchildren, both granddaughters, the character Elsa sings a song. I wish I knew all of the words to it. I should as much
Excuse
as
me just a second, Judge Hastings. Is your microphone on?
Yes, it
the
is, Mr.
witness?
Chairman.
Okay, they're saying they cannot hear you.
Yeah, I'm saying that in the movie Frozen, the character sings a song that says, "Let it go." And let it go is what the Republicans need to do, not just with this particular measure, but there seems to be this obsession that I've witnessed now for 22 years of involvement with what a woman's right to choose is. And like Mr. McGovern, I associate myself with his remarks. The dramatic thrust seems always to go toward poor women, and that by at least my reasoning allows that rich women that have abortions don't have this problem. And if we were to just listen to people, I guess we figure that rich women don't have abortions. I think I've told the story when I was a child, when wealthy women got pregnant. It was that they would go to Europe on vacation for a period of time. Well, my question, I guess, to Representative Blackburn, and I have great respect for her legislative skills and passion on this issue. It rivals mine on the opposite side, and I appreciate that. But in some counties, Ms. Blackburn, Planned Parenthood is the only place for safety net recipients to receive family planning care. And so where do you recommend that they seek treatment if the provider has been expelled from the state's Medicaid program? And I heard you earlier say that they would go into the system, but there are some counties that don't have community health facilities.
One of the things that we have found, Mr. Hastings, is that you have over 13,000 community health and federally qualified health centers in the country, and then with Planned Parenthood, you have a much smaller number of facilities. The community health outreach outnumbers the Planned Parenthood availability tremendously. And one of the things that we have seen also is Planned Parenthood has curtailed and outsourced many of their resources is that your faith-based clinics, your FQHCs, your community health systems are the ones that have been picking up the slack on those.
But you answered what you wanted to answer. You did not answer my question. When no facility exists, other than Planned Parenthood, where would you have women
in
go
rural and
nowhere else?
underserved areas? I am not aware of there being any county in this country where there is
counties
only.
where there are no community health centers?
I am aware that there are community health departments and federally qualified health centers, and that the services are available through those, and they're more readily available than they are through the Planned Parenthood centers. We have 55 Planned Parenthood affiliates around the country. Some of them have as many as 20 different clinics.
Just reclaiming my time for a moment, I agree with you that community facilities, if you look at the overall number, outnumber the number.
Yes, and the access is greater.
You still are not getting to the root of my problem. Ms. Jakonski?
I want to make the point, this bill does not specifically mention
Right.
Planned Parenthood. And so there are counties
Right.
and there are community health centers that do, with their own money or private insurance money or whatever, provide abortion services. So this is legislation that could also take those providers out of the system. This deals with anyone. The state could say, for example, Cook County, if the legislature decided that Cook County health systems, and that's clinics and it's also the hospital, could not be a Medicaid recipient because with non-federal money for poor women, it does provide the whole range of services, including abortion services. The state legislature, I guess posing as doctors, would decide that this health service should not be available. And that would be that.
Yeah. It would seem that the legislation itself is incredibly far-reaching and would essentially allow a state to exclude any provider or entity that has provided an abortion, or any entity or provider that has had any sort of association or involvement with abortion. Listen to the language, and I ask unanimous consent to include a letter over the signature of Mark DeFrancesco,
Without objection, I'll be it in the record.
who is the president of the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. He says, on behalf of the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, representing 57,000 physicians and partners in women's health, I urge you to vote no on the Women's Public Health and Safety Act. This intentionally vague bill should not be enacted into law. In falling far short of any standard for sound federal health legislation and policy, it would serve only to scare providers away from providing comprehensive, compassionate care to women and leave women without the care they need. America needs more OBGYNs participating in Medicaid program, in the Medicaid program. This bill would do the opposite. When it comes to the House floor, I urge you to vote no. Don't be fooled by the title of this bill. This legislation is nothing more than the latest in a string of attacks against women's health. I find it passing strange that where current law denies federal Medicaid coverage of abortion, and that Congress currently imposes unfair limitations on insurance coverage of abortion. Federal dollars are withheld from covering a woman's abortion except in limited circumstances, and we all know those. And federal insurance coverage of abortion is restricted. So I don't know why we're here other than what Ms. Slaughter said, and I'd like to associate myself with her remarks. All we're doing is giving some currency to those who don't want to vote for a clean CR. I might add, Mr. Chairman, I'm in full disagreement with waiving the 6th committee rule for energy and commerce to form some committee to go on yet another unnecessary probe into not only an organization, but just to give vent to the feelings of some. I don't want a special committee to preserve our providers. I don't need a special committee to preserve what is the law of the land. Ultimately, what you all seek to do, and it is that you continue down this path, is to set the stage ultimately for the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And that's basically not this little bitty provision here. This is just one of many over 22 years leading in that direction. And I strongly urge that because some people have a view that is different than mine, does not make my view be the prevailing view. But the prevailing sentiment in this country is that women should have the right to control their bodies and to make a determination as to who it is they wish to associate with as a physician. And for a law that limits that association flies in the face of all of the anti-talk about Obamacare, where people were talking about you won't have your right to choose your own physician. And then you come here and say to poor women, hell no, you don't have that right to go to the providers that are in that area. We should be ashamed of ourselves, putting ourselves in that position. And I certainly will stand in complete opposition to not only this legislation, but the ultimate aim that you have, and that is overturning Roe versus Wade. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Does any other Republican seek time? Seeing none, I would, does the gentleman from Colorado seek time? Yes, the gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kowski, I wanted to see if I'm kind of understanding how this bill works. The other week, there was a specific bill around Planned Parenthood funding. This bill now doesn't mention Planned Parenthood, but it could actually defund the community health clinics, which last week, if I recall, many of the Republicans were arguing how don't worry about Planned Parenthood, the community health clinics will somehow serve all the women. Now they're actually doing a bill that seems to defund these, as you know, these community health clinics rely on Medicaid funding. It seems to defund these very community health clinics. Am I understanding that these two together would cut off access to for poor women to health care?
Well, it could, if those clinics, which we have in Cook County and in some other places in the state of Illinois, also were to dare to participate, that's the word, so I'm not sure exactly what that means, in abortion services, they could be cut off just as easily as a Planned Parenthood clinic could be cut off and defunded. And understand that there are many, many poor women for whom these clinics are the lifeline. That's what we're talking about. When we talk about Medicaid, you have to meet fairly strict income and asset requirements in order to get on the program, and they rely on these Medicaid providers, and any one of them could be gone.
And what might that word participate mean? I mean, would that might mean that if a doctor says your pregnancy could be dangerous to your health and you might need to look at alternatives if it's a non-viable fetus? I mean, would all those things could potentially be considered participating?
Well, I'm certainly confused on what that could mean. I don't
Ms.
know.
Blackburn, would that, if a doctor found that a pregnancy could be life-threatening for the mother, if they were to inform her of that, would that be participating and therefore render the clinic a potential loss of funding?
I would direct you to page 2 of the bill, line 3, and reading through the end of the bill, where you will see that the flexibility is given there. And again, Mr. Paulus, as I have said previously, this is about flexibility for the states. We have states that have sought to end their contracts, their Medicaid contracts. They've been blocked from doing that by CMS. They are seeking help from us. This is a way to make that happen. We have 4 states that currently are in litigation.
One moment, please. Which part of the bill were you direct? Is it your amendment, your amendment, or the bill, the underlying bill you're referring me to?
I'm on the amendment.
Oh, the amendment, and then which lines?
Page 2, line 3, and reading.
Exception. Okay.
Yes, yes. But what you will see is that this allows a state to choose to establish criteria regarding the participation in its Medicaid program. Whether it's institutions, agencies, entities, this is something that states have said to us, yes, we would like to have this flexibility, and it gives the states a maximum flexibility so that they can come in and set these programs, work with these providers. In Texas, Dr. Burgess just gave us a great example. When they did the decoupling in Texas, we know it works, and that access to care increases when you allow the states that flexibility. And the stats that come from Texas certainly are proof of that. You can look at some of the faith-based and community clinics that have provided necessary outreach and the way their numbers have increased.
Well, I mean, there's nothing to stop any of these clinics from doing outreach now. This refers to potential loss of funding for clinics that have a series of health services that you disagree with. The exception that you have pointed to is only for a life-endangering physical condition, not for a health-endangering physical condition, and it would require a very high burden on an imminent danger of death unless an abortion is performed. You know, often when a doctor is working with the patient, one of the reasons that this is not a good area for government to get involved with is it's a lot more nuanced than that. The doctor might alert the woman that there are high risks with a particular pregnancy, or that the pregnancy could have severe health implications. It may or may not reach this standard of immediately life-endangering physical condition. There's a lot broader set of circumstances which are customarily, in fact, it is the responsibility of a doctor with the Hippocratic Oath to make sure that their parent, the mother, is aware of the impact on her health. So I really see these bills from last week and this week as a double whammy. One, of course, targeting Planned Parenthood specifically. The second one threatening to undercut the very system of community health clinics, which just last week were touted as potential alternatives to Planned Parenthood for women, insufficient as they are, with not enough locations, of course, to serve nearly the number of women that are currently served by Planned Parenthood. So I think that, you know, these two bills are clearly the wrong direction. I think we'll also be talking about another select committee or special committee shortly. You know, again, my view on that is that the only committee of jurisdiction on these matters is a woman, her doctor, and God, and any other legislative body simply doesn't have jurisdiction, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Seeing no time being requested by any other member, I want to thank both of you for taking time to be with us. As we spoke up front, this is it's an important and sensitive issue, and I appreciate both of our witnesses appropriately presenting their views with respect to each other and this committee, and I want to thank both of you very much for your time. If you'll please make sure you say for our awesome stenographer anything you had in writing that you came here with, and thank you very much. This now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 3495, the Women's Health and Safety Act, and the chair will be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina, the vice chairman of the committee, Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 3495, the Women's Public Health and Safety Act, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment printed in the Rules Committee report shall be considered as adopted and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions of the bill as amended. The rule provides 1 motion to recommit with or without instructions. Finally, Section 2 of the rule waives Clause 6A of Rule 13, requiring a 2/3 vote to consider a rule on the same day as it is reported from the Rules Committee against any resolution reported from the Rules Committee through the legislative day of October 1, 2015.
You've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina, as well as what I believe is a straightforward explanation of the rules. Is there amendment or discussion to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. H.R. 3495 is yet another bill that has failed to go through regular order. There have been no hearings or markups on this bill, meaning we have not heard from expert witnesses and no one has had an opportunity to even offer amendments to improve this bill. Even worse, today's closed rule self-executes a hand-picked Republican amendment denying members the opportunity to vote on it and then completely shuts down the amendment process for the other 434 members. And I'd like to put on the record a statement about what happened in other places where they tried to shut down the Planned Parenthood providers. In Indiana, it led to an HIV epidemic, and I know we all know about that. In Texas, it led to tens of thousands of women not getting care, and in Tennessee has led to a 1,400% drop in services. Is it too much to ask that we follow regular order and allow the House to work its will on a measure of such importance? Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 3495 an open rule so that all members, both sides of the House, have an opportunity to offer amendments to this bill on the floor as we were elected to do.
You've heard the amendment and the discussion. Further discussion by any member of the committee? Seeing none, the vote will now be on slaughter amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Those have it,
Roll
noes
call,
have it.
please,
Gentlewoman
Mr.
asks for a
Chairman.
roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? No. Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? No. Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Yes.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings?
Yes.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to, not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion, gentleman from Massachusetts recognized. The gentleman does not seek time. I apologize. Is there further? The gentleman from Colorado.
I just wanted to acknowledge I have a very special guest tonight. My sister is here, Jordana Polishutz. Wanted to welcome her to the Rules Committee.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. So we've had your dad, we've had your son.
It's a big month for family, Mr.
Big month for families.
Always.
It's a big month for family, Mr. Majority Leader. I mean, Mr. Chairman.
There you go. Well, this is awesome, and we're delighted to
Currying
have
a little
her.
favor over there.
Yeah, I know how that works, but I'm delighted that you. Where's she from?
She's from Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
No further amendments or discussions, so the vote now be on the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes
Roll
have, the
call,
ayes have. Gentlewoman asked for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers? Aye. Mr. Stivers, aye. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, aye. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, aye. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, aye. Ms. Slaughter?
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings? No. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis? No. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
9 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is agreed to, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Vice Chairman of the committee, Mrs. Fox, will be handling this for Republicans.
And Mr. Hastings for the Democrats.
And Judge Hastings for Democrats. I'd like to, if I can, be as clear as I can be, not knowing when the Senate will perform their duties, knowing that rather quickly, as soon as we receive it, we would want members to know, put us on notice. But our next scheduled meeting is for Wednesday at 3 o'clock, knowing that if the Senate gets their work done, we would come in as quickly as possible. I will deal with, hopefully, this and work with you.
And this will be the only committee that will deal with the CR.
It is probably because of the timing, I would anticipate that, but I know Miles and Hugh will be in contact, and I'll do my very best to get with you.
Can't wait to see what's in there.
Well, I know you will, and me too. Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
now finishes the committee work for the day. Thank you very much.